All right. Molo Sanbonani, hello, how's it? Shalom. Good evening, good people. Welcome to it. This is the first episode of the Big Daddy Liberty Show. Give me 2 seconds, people. I just need to switch from what I think is 4G to my Wi-Fi. We'll be with you in a short second. All right, here we go. Let's try that again. Molo Sanbonani, hello, how's it? Good evening, shalom, chenant, good people. Welcome to it. It's 2022, good people. Hey, tada. How did you enter this wonderful new year? Let me know in the comments, please. Did you guys spend Christmas, especially you guys in the Christian community? Did you spend Christmas with family together? Contra the ill advice of stay at home and blah, 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 blah. Did you actually see each other finally as a family after a hard 2021? I hope you guys spent good time together. Welcome to it. We are back here on the BDL show. Lots of changes, guys, for 2022. We're going to sharpen things up a little bit here at the BDL show, including, by the way, much more in the way of content. You're going to have a daily offering of the show. More on that much later. For now, this is the Big Daddy Liberty Show, the first one for 2022. Welcome to it. I wanted us to begin this year on a relatively light note. As I see myself frozen on the screen. There we go. I think I'm back. We're going to begin this year on a relatively light note. There we go. I think I'm back. Relatively light note insofar as bringing out the crystal ball and, to the best of our ability, looking at the year ahead. What can we expect? What should we be looking out for? And what are some of the major ticket items, the big issues that we should be wary of and abreast of, and of course still fighting insofar as that traditional society that I've come to characterize South Africa as being, which is one of you, us, me, the ordinary South African, the faith, flag, family, and freedom type South African versus the political elites, those who govern us and rule us in the way at least they see things in that regard. But I'm not going to unpack this year alone, and I'm not going to try and forecast alone in this year. I'm going to bring out that Harry Potter sorting hat of sorts, which again, I'm just wary of this freezing. Guys, just in the comment section, let me know if this broadcast is smooth. If it's not, I'm going to try and switch back to the Wi-Fi, and we'll see how that works. But as I said, I'm going to bring out the sorting hat here, a veritable mix of who's who in my guest lineup as we just really unpack this year in a very quick manner. I've got, of course, first on my control panel here, the co-host of the Man Patria podcast. I'm talking, of course, about a firm favorite here on the BDL show, Ukoketso Resane. There he is on screen. Ukoketso, good evening. Welcome to the BDL show.
Yeah, it's great to be back. Good evening to you. Good evening to everyone else. Let's have some fun.
Awesome. Thank you, brother man. I'm just reading the commentary here. Some saying you're fine, a little glitchy on my side from Michael Jones. I do see you. Guys, if it does become a problem, just let me know in the comment section. The host of the Conscious Caracal, on social media, and of course the host of his own show, Ernst van Sale. There he is on screen. Ernst, good evening.
Good evening, Sihle. I'm always amazed with the quality of guests I'm surrounded with on the panel. You always bring together incredible minds, and I'm very honored to be on the first episode of your show for 2022.
Awesome, my brother. You definitely are one of those awesome minds. Another such awesome mind is a chap who is from the Daily Friend publication. You'll find his writing, opining, and news pieces at www.dailyfriend.co.za. Just clearing those holiday cobwebs. There he is, Marius Rutt. Marius, good evening.
As a coquetto, Ernst. I hope you guys are doing all right.
Awesome, brother. You're a little bit on the faint side. If you can just bring the mic a little closer to you. But that's, of course, Marius Rutt from the Daily Friend publication. Please check them out when you have a moment. Last but definitely not least, a chap who I know is a firm favorite on this channel. He is my go-to for all things Legal Eagle, a chap who wears two hats. He's wearing a very swazzy one tonight, but two hats nonetheless. One from the Free Market Foundation, and of course, the chaps out in Pretoria at Sakelecha. There he is, Martin van Staden. Martin, good evening.
Hello, Sihle. Thanks for having me. Happy New Year to everyone here and everyone watching. It's hopefully it's going to be a better one.
Awesome. I really do appreciate you being on the show. I'm just being mindful once again of my feedback from the audience. A little bit of a lag on my side, freezing a bit now. Okay, guys, I will try and work that out, but this is going to be a relatively short broadcast. So let's see if we can work our way through it. Otherwise, I'll try and troubleshoot it at the halfway mark. Guys, I really want us to have a relatively light conversation insofar as I'm asking you to whip out the crystal ball. You know, there are some issues that we're carrying over from 2021, big ticket issues that we've been fighting as South Africans. Let me begin perhaps at the top of the table, the ongoing lockdown. It seems as though there is a now finally massive tide turning against this lockdown as the science, the data, the evidence is now even looked at by people who before called us conspiracy theorists for bringing it out. Ernst?
Well, Sihle, what we've seen here in the past 2 years, it's almost as if 2021 and 2020 are the same year. Those 2 years just pretty much melt into each other. But I think when 2022 now has rolled around, I really think this year is going to be the year where we have to rehabilitate normality. Now, I'm not one for really bringing out the crystal ball. I'm not a big fan of making predictions because I think a lot of people that like doing predictions also like deleting tweets. I think there's a big correlation there. So when it comes to the year ahead, I'd rather like to talk about what I want to see happen and what I think should happen. And I think, like I said, firstly, rehabilitation of normality. I think people need to start rehabilitating their lives, getting back to their lives as they were. I'm not saying you should break the law. I'm not saying you should be reckless. I'm saying you should be on the side of having the audacity to take back some of the old world before COVID. And I think we owe that to the next generation as well. We have now a very young generation, not just in our country, but across the world, that see masks as normal, that see lockdowns as normal, that see all these draconian regulations around them at school, at the supermarket, in the streets. All of that is being normalized. And that would be the biggest mistake, is to make that the new normal, as something that a lot of people are calling it. So I think this year, Omicron very much is blessing us with the fact that it isn't a very deadly variant. It is a variant that's more that's spreading faster. More people are getting it, but less people are dying. That's an excellent sign. That's showing that the virus is fighting for survival. That's usually, and I'm not an epidemiologist, but that's usually the historical pattern where a virus starts becoming less deadly, more infectious, to try and keep itself propagating. So we should be seeing less and less deadly variants if more variants appear in the future. So maybe just to end off there, I really hope and I want to see 2022 be the year where we go back to normality to a large extent. I don't think we will in all aspects, but I think that how much normality we bring back and how much of the pre-COVID world we bring back will depend on people's actions and what they're willing to do.
Well, absolutely. Martin, I must come to you because, we've been having this conversation, including here on the BDL show. In fact, I've already received two, what they call strikes against my channel. It is risking being demonetized simply for calling out a lockdown as a mechanism of supposedly, as we're told, slowing the spread of the virus that we're told. But actually what we've come to see is, if anything, slowing the freedoms and the liberties of a free people, or should be a free peoples.
Yeah, no, that's true. And we've seen the goalposts move of the lockdown every few weeks, actually. Since it started, it was about slowing the spread. Then we're now at the point where everyone needs to be vaccinated. But as you say, that there is a clear turning of the tide, and I'm quite surprised. A lot of people who are very pro lockdown now seem to be saying, "Listen, there really isn't any point in carrying forth with this." So that's at least a good sign. The thing that I'm concerned about that might happen this year is that there will be much fanfare when President Ramaphosa does his perhaps his last Sunday night talking to us, and there he announces that lockdown is over. And he gets the great clapping, and everyone says he's a visionary leader and he's acting decisively again. But in the background, we have the Department of Tourism basically taking lockdown measures, putting it in ordinary regulations under the Tourism Act, not under the Disaster Management Act, and saying that forevermore, if you own an Airbnb, a hotel, a conference venue, you must have social distancing regulations, you must have rules around wearing masks, doing exactly what Ernst just said, and that is normalizing these measures. And I wrote an article for Business Day yesterday where I said we need to be very careful about immortalizing or monumentalizing, in a way, the protocol, the COVID protocols, and getting past COVID, the lockdown, and COVID becomes endemic and it's no longer an issue. But we've set these precedents where I don't know, we continue to have snot sprayed on our hands 10 times a day when we go into stores, even though we wash our hands with soap and so on. We're clean and everything, but we need to get strangers to spray stuff on our hands, and that becomes normal. That is a huge risk, and that is what probably one of the biggest things I'm gonna keep my eye on this year and going forward, and that is how the incredibly dangerous precedents that we have set over the last 2 years, how they are going to be abused. How they are going to slip under the radar and become part of our normal existence. That's extremely important. And then just to finish off this point, we were joking in the office a few days ago and saying we want to go back to normal. We want to be worrying about things like the sovereign debt crisis, about expropriation without compensation, about affirmative action and black economic empowerment and regulations destroying the economy. We want to go back to normal. We want to stop worrying about wearing masks and smothering ourselves and having weird stuff sprayed on our fingers. It's an incredible time to be alive, where we're yearning for the normal South Africa, the normal South African politics. That is really bad. But let's get back to that first. Lockdown needs to be ended unconditionally. All its protocols need to be thrown in the trash, not hidden away. And then we can fight those battles again and then hopefully win.
Absolutely. And again, I must bring this up in relation to me then passing the baton to Ukoketso and then Marius. And I want to add the next topic just on this particular issue, insofar as what is it that we need to be looking out for, a fight perhaps that we're carrying on from the previous year into this year that needs finality. And Martin did a nice little segue for me there in saying, hey, actually there are major issues that are pre-existing in this country that we need to start looking and tackling. Let me bring up, guys, the specter of unemployment in this country, which continues to be the single greatest threat to South African democracy, outside of course, the usuals, your EWCs and the like. But you cannot have a stable society if the vast majority, ever increasingly what's becoming a majority of people in it, have no means of putting bread on their own table, becoming dependent on the very same politicians who then push bad ideas, whether those ideas are lockdowns, expropriation, or race-based legislation that serves an elite. We need to get back to focusing on those issues. Okay, so that unemployment time bomb, it's definitely a ticking one, isn't it?
Yeah, I think really the ministers who are in control of this situation are on borrowed time as we speak. As we approach Osona, it's very interesting to see how the president is going to respond, of course. But let this not absolve trade and industry, Ibrahim Patel. Let this not absolve also the Department of Small Business Development, I believe it's called. So again, we all know that the biggest thing with those unemployment statistics really is how the youth are particularly unemployed. What we're seeing happen is year in, year out, you've got a lot of graduates finishing off their degree, diploma, higher certificate, and then being faced with the mountainous task of having to find a place of employment and or finding finding capital for them to actually be entrepreneurs and start out their journeys in that respect. And they're finding it very difficult. And these are voices who typically a lot of them haven't really had a say in terms of voting. And we're going to actually see now how Cyril particularly responds to this in something like Osona and even in the budget speech. But probably as a backdrop to all of this, not just unemployment, but exactly like Martin mentioned, things like, expropriation without compensation and the like. There's always that one thing that everyone kind of forgets. Last year on Man Patria, on our first show last year, I'd mentioned that this was actually an election year, and no one but Herman Mashaba was actually out campaigning. This was again in the first weeks of January. This time around, we're still kind of in the first weeks of January, and everyone has kind of forgotten that we are due for a national census, which I believe starts next month. So once Stats SA gets its ducks in a row and starts doing that national census, we'll actually have some more solid numbers in terms of population demographics. And then we can use that data to then overlay on top of all of the other social issues, not just unemployment, but also things like the housing crisis, the water crisis. So there's quite a lot which actually depends on solid data. And this being a census year, is a good enough it's a good enough point in time to not just count the heads but also now overlay that with other aggregate data which Stats SA has been providing, but in addition to things like the unemployment statistics. So it's going to create a headache for Cyril Ramaphosa and the cabinet at large. I don't think they have the energy to actually effectively fight all of these things to save their political skins.
Absolutely. And again, that been an important point there. As I always say, data. I cannot make bricks without clay. Marius, let me come to you. Because, Ukoketso, I threw the unemployment gauntlet, or rather the unemployment facet at, and I'll give everybody a chance to chew on this burn, but I really want you to open up the salvo when it comes to expropriation without compensation, because this is the one which obviously, insofar as last year, it saw a quasi conclusion in Parliament by way of its defeat as a motion to amend the Constitution. However, there is still the expropriation bill that is a proposed piece of legislation being pushed by politicians in Parliament. That is the fight of 2022, is it not?
Yeah, I think that's spot on, Sikhle. And I think the ANC and the government is still going to push for other bad policies, things like NHI. There's probably going to be a ramping up of black economic empowerment policies and so on. And it's, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing, expecting a different result. And it seems to be that's exactly what our government. We saw what happened with COVID. That the public health system simply can't. It can't function. The government can't run a public health system. There's so many failures. We still have Charlotte Makeke Hospital, which is still, as far as I know, is closed. That's probably going to be opened in the next couple of years. And the government now wants to run the entire healthcare system of South Africa. The NHI is not going away anytime soon. And despite all the evidence, the government still wants to do it. Same with the expropriation without compensation. We've seen what's has happened in other countries. We've seen what's happened in South Africa when there have been beneficiaries of land reform and so on, where people don't get support, they don't have the capital to get their farms working and so on. Even people who do want to farm, because as we know, most people who are going to be beneficiaries of land reform actually choose to take cash rather than the actual land and what have you. But still, for some reason, we know it's just this kind of it's a red herring for the government points it and claims that there's massive land hunger in South Africa, but we've seen from anecdotal evidence and from statistics and so on, that's definitely not true. The biggest problem in South Africa, and what Koketso was talking about, it's unemployment. I mean, we have the expanded unemployment rate is around about 40% now. I think if you look at in rural KwaZulu-Natal, the unemployment rate outside of eThekwini in KwaZulu-Natal is over 50%. Same in the Eastern Cape, outside of Nelson Mandela Bay and Buffalo City, the unemployment rate is over 50% in the Eastern Cape. It's absolutely shocking. And we also, one thing that we must also remember, behind these numbers, we can look at these numbers and we can, despair and put our head in our hands. But behind those numbers that you see in the Stats SA documents, 10 million people unemployed, whatever, remember there's a human being behind there. And that the dignity that these people lose because people are unemployed, they can't provide for themselves or their family, they're reliant on the goodwill of others. It's terrible for people, and it's something that is South Africa's biggest challenge. We need to, each policy that we look at in South Africa, the main thing to look at is how is this going to create jobs in South Africa? And we know that the government isn't looking at that. We've seen there's been job destruction in this country over the last couple of years, and unfortunately, I don't think things are going to change anytime soon. Maybe I'm being a bit too pessimistic because we have seen especially with the regulations around lockdown and so on, that the ANC and Cyril Ramaphosa did move away from hard lockdown rules. Even when we saw this Omicron variant in December, things went carried on pretty much as normal. And I think part of that is because the ANC got a bloody nose in November in the local government elections.
That's right. Absolutely. And again, it lends itself to that notion. Martin, I see you nodding because we've spoken about this notion before here on the show. In fact, you and I in particular, this only ends when you, the citizen, decide and tell the politician it should end. And that local government election was a very strong sign, a very strong message, I think is the word I'm looking for, especially from the ANC's own base that literally said enough with this nonsense. But let me move this conversation along, because I really want us to actually to unpack this year to the best of our ability. We've looked at the unemployment, we've discussed EWC as these ongoing issues that we're carrying from the past. Koketso made the rightful point that there are broader issues here that need to be brought back insofar as, actually, Martin, you also made this point that we need to start tackling again, because they speak to the actual health of the nation going forward. Speaking about the health of the democracy, or rather the politics of this country, the start of this year has also been just shrouded in what can only be described as I don't even have the words for it. It's been a very awkward beginning to this year. Let me bring in a little bit of current affairs here, guys, because I think they'll set the tone also for the year going forward. There does seem to be a concerted effort to dribble and distract the South African populace. Let me bring exhibit number one, a certain fire at a certain building. If I can copy the framing of a one Ilhan Omar. Something happened at a certain building in Cape Town. But I'm talking, of course, about the fire in Parliament, and of course, the rhetoric around it, around the supposed sophistication of the alleged person who did this, and then who it was shown in court. Finally, after they were drumming up this notion of this is an attack on our democracy, the person who then appears in court cuts a lonely and sad, poor figure in a one Zandile Mafu. Martin, what's going on here? Are we being dribbled, number one? And number two, what should we gain or read into when we see Parliament, go up in flames, and then almost a few days later, the Constitutional Court also coming under attack?
Yeah, look, I think that I'm not sure if this is a false flag attack or what have you, but what I am very quite happy about, and I shouldn't be. I'm a constitutional scholar. I shouldn't be happy about this, but I am, and that is that no one cares. No one cares. No one I speak to cares that Parliament is burned down. Nobody knows that the Constitutional Court was attacked. Give me a break. No one cares. If you bombard your population with absolute evil destruction, for 2+ years, all sorts of nonsense, adding hundreds of thousands, millions of people to the ranks of the unemployed with your policies. If people are starving, people don't have jobs, there's total hopelessness. If you bombard people with that, they're not going to care if the source of that problem, Parliament, burns. Now it's not a sign of a healthy society that no one cares. I mean, compare with the so-called insurrection of January 5th and 6th in the United States. Everyone cared quite a bit about that. And the Capitol building in the United States still stands. Parliament, the National Assembly chamber in South Africa, I think, has burned down totally or something. I'm not entirely sure, but no one cares, and that's good. That means that I think South Africans have their eye on the ball. They understand that this is at best an accidental distraction, and they're not going to allow themselves to be drawn in by it. And I think that's very, very good, very important. So let's and what you said earlier, I don't want to make this entirely negative about how people are hopeless. The fact about the election is very important. 2024, I agree with the IRR's analysis on this. I think 2024 is a very important year coming at us, and it's a great opportunity for us to actually see some real political change here. Although I must disclaim that don't put your eggs in that basket. Invest in your community, invest in yourself, invest in the state proofing of your community, your business, your family, yourself, because 2024 can go ugly as well. So keep on becoming more and more independent from the state insofar as you can. Keep on ignoring political promises and so forth, but there is a chance. There is a whiff of freedom emanating from 2024. So let's hope and let's work towards it. But forget about the distractions, even if Parliament burns to the ground entirely.
Absolutely. I want to bring Ernst in here because for me there was a funny dichotomy that was exposed quite overtly in this whole Parliament burning thing. And I'm just using it really as a play stopper. There's a broader issue here at play. But before I get into that, Ernst, before I get to you, just a reminder, I'm going to extend the show just by 10 minutes, if my guests don't mind. Just 10 minutes of this. Couple of things I want us to unpack and finish off. And as I say that, I reminded to you, dear viewer, hey man, I know it's the first episode of the year, but hit that like button. My likes are nowhere near where they should be. Get my likes up, people. I love that engagement to be over 50%. So now that there is about 135 of us across the platforms watching, I want to get that 50% engagement. Do it right now. Hit that like button. Remember, if you hit that like button right now, I must say this, I must stress this. If you hit that like button right now, Jacob Zuma will literally have his food be snatched away from him tonight, and I'll have his dinner. How's that? None of that is true, but hey, it's worth you hitting that like button. Do it right now, and it'll definitely help the show reach a wider audience. Adam, let me come back to you, because for me, there's a broader story here. And I've sort of touched on it a little bit. I've traversed it insofar as bringing up the unemployment issue. I've sort of touched on it insofar as bringing up the bad policies from politicians, the elites in our society, where Parliament is the place where mostly this happens, right? The unemployment, it was almost as if those two things came together on the issue of of Parliament burning, insofar as the elite and their home, their sanctuary, their sacred space going up in flames. And who is to blame? The very poor person who's on the receiving end of what they do in that house. That guy, ironically, became the scapegoat. And I use the word scapegoat because I called him Billy Goat Gruff, especially given their first appearance he did in court. Homie was looking really gruff. But again, he was the goat that they were trying to make him out be. Hashtag Billy Goat Gruff. Let's get that going. But he was the scapegoat that they were trying him to be, because again, it was the failure of the actual politicians themselves, ironically, that saw that building go up in flames. Is that not indicative of the country we're in a broader scale?
Well, Sinclair, I'm very glad that you used the term scapegoat, because I think there is another angle also to this Parliament fire, and that is the spectre of Jacob Zuma and the dastardly RET faction hanging over this whole affair. I mean, you could see the speculation already happening from the commentariat in South Africa. how we need to figure out how Jacob Zuma is behind this, if not Jan van Riebeeck. And I think this is a problem that we see here, specifically now in a year where corruption is going to be at the forefront of South African news and the South African political scene. We're going to see a lot of scapegoating. And I'm not writing off what Jacob Zuma did. His administration was a catastrophic failure. Immeasurable damage was done under his watch. But he's also not an omnipresent, omnipotent puppet master that is behind the petrol price, behind the parliament fire, behind you stubbing your toe in the morning. You cannot go that route when it comes to South African politics. There's a lot more complexity going on here. And a very serious question needs to be asked. Where does Cyril Ramaphosa's legacy start and where does Jacob Zuma's end? We've had 4 years of Cyril Ramaphosa at the helm. The ship is still sailing towards the iceberg, and everyone is still saying, well, it was Jacob Zuma that put us on that course. There's a new captain at the wheel, but the ship is still moving in the same direction. We've not seen any Carter heads roll for corruption. This year, we're going to have to see, with the Zondo Commission's report on state capture coming out, the first part already being published, a lot of finger pointing, a lot of names being named, a lot of evidence. So we're going to have to see, does Cyril Ramaphosa have the spinal fortitude to do anything about it? I mean, his deafening silence on some comments from Sisulu this week already gives you an idea. And there's that clip of him saying that he'd rather go down as a weak president than actually split the ANC. And I think he's doing a very marvelous job at that. He's really not. I don't think there's any on record instance of him saying something negative, condemning, or critical of Jacob Zuma. I challenge people to go look for something like that. I think that was pointed out this week, that there's actually no record of any such thing. So I think we need to start pointing our fingers at the man in charge, the general in this war, the guy, the father in the family meeting, if you really want to use that terminology. We can't keep blaming the neighbor's dog for what's going on in our household. Maybe it's our father's fault, if you really want to use that metaphor. So I think in this year, don't fall for the scapegoating. Don't fall for the RET faction boogeyman. Don't fall for the Jacob Zuma specter, or Jacob Zuma is under everyone's bed and he's the reason that one of your socks keeps disappearing. I think we need to start keeping the people and holding the people accountable that are in positions of power. Cyril Ramaphosa is keeping all these useless ministers in power. Fikile Mbalula was appointed by Cyril Ramaphosa, still enjoys his very nice position because of him. Bheki Cele, the superstar of South African lockdown, was appointed by Cyril Ramaphosa and still enjoys his position as Minister of Police. We need to start asking questions of the president at the helm, not the specter and the ghost of the president of the past, even though there's definitely a legacy of Jacob Zuma. Let's ask the question in 2022, what is Cyril Ramaphosa's legacy so far?
And which brings me then to that last issue that I think we need to chew on as a panel. And Koketso, I'm going to come to you because it really is, I think it's going to be the signifying moment of the next 18 months or so until the next general, that's the national election, which is two broad things. Number one, this election and this period, the run-up to this election, will be defined by two things. The ANC's ongoing self-mutilation and literally destroying itself, as not only it splinters into various factions, which is the overt part, that's the part that we all see, but it continues to push a basket of ideas that clearly the outcomes of which the electorate has said enough with and we're sick of. The ANC has actually done a marvelous job of isolating itself from the sentiments of a South African society who on this show I often characterize as being a faith, flag, family, and freedom type society, because really that's the broad set of values that South Africans coalesce around, regardless of race, which is what the politicians focus on, regardless of gender, which is an ever-increasing aspect, an identity aspect that the politics is playing into. That people actually look at bread and butter issues and the values that hold them together, and the family unit as being the center at which all of these things need to happen at. So that's the first element. The second one being, of course, what our opposition parties need to be doing insofar as the opportunity given to them in this current election or the last election, that's the local government election, of, hey guys, get your act together when it comes to coalitions, because this may very well be the future of our politics, the near future, the short-term future, rather, of our politics. Therefore, with those two things as your points of analysis, Koke, to talk to me about the next 18 months in the run-up to that next election, what should opposition parties, ordinary South Africans, and hey, even us, the so-called influencers, if you will, should be doing in terms of winning the battle of ideas?
Sure. Yeah, it's quite a heavy one. I think there's a lot to consider in that. Definitely, especially in the remainder of the year, coalition politics are really going to take center stage. What I think personally will happen is that the Democratic Alliance and their coalitions, that is where it's a DA-led coalition, to speak of it that way, I think they'll maybe just decide to, silently do the work and don't say too much, unless it's necessary, of course. They'll come out and give their state of the city address and that sort of thing. But I think they're probably looking or probably aiming to just silently do the work. I say this because at some point, you can expect the ANC and the EFF especially to break apart the coalition or try to do that. Now, what's likely to happen is if the DA and some of the other partners, particularly Action SA, and there's a few other minority players scattered throughout the country, if they can actually just bunker in and do their work and then have someone like the EFF or the ANC try to break up the coalition, that will, I think, send a message to the citizenry that actually our best interests are not front and center to some of these so-called radical parties. That will clearly send the message, which in the run-up to the next election will help them lose credibility. I do expect the EFF to probably go back into the single digits, of course, in the face of all of this. They can prove me wrong, of course. But yeah, I think that's exactly what will happen. But when it comes to the ruling party, I've actually been approached by local representatives of the ruling party where I live, and I almost get the sense that there are people within the ANC who are really trying to, I would say, be the change they want to see. Typically, these are your younger guys who, for them, the ANC is a political home and they don't want to abandon it for some odd reason, which, of course, they're entitled to that. But once they get blocked out at some level, maybe at a provincial level, when they run into that brick wall of, deployed cadres or preferred comrades being put ahead of them, I think that will then send a message. And all of this will then just contribute to the ANC potentially going further into wars that are faction-based, potentially other people deciding to, jump ship and go join other parties and the like. But with all of this said, what this does is it creates a mess when it comes to governance. And governance is where, irrespective of your political ideology, you still want to see your tax money, your levies, your rates actually doing something for your community. And then, of course, over and above that, those who you put in parliament, you want to see them doing something about it. Unfortunately, we've now gone through the past 2 years of not exactly living our best lives. And so all parties, I believe, are under pressure to actually re-earn the vote, even inside of parliament, be it whether it remains in Cape Town or gets relocated, of course. But all parties do kind of have to re-earn our votes. And once we're in that situation closer to election time, I do see now, what I've always believed, that most people are somewhat conservative within the country. And this becomes an easy win in the run up to the next election for your more conservative parties to come out and say, hey, listen, the past 4 years is a clear reminder that, go back to your standard traditional family flag values and let us actually represent you. That's my, I would say, analysis on that, or even call it a prediction, if you will. But let's see how it plays out. At the end of the day, the coalition, I don't believe, will continue in peace, if I can put it that way. Expect some form of disruption, either through a motion of no confidence, etc., particularly in your metropolitan areas. But when all of that happens, it's definitely going to be pushed forward by your more radical parties who are really fighting for relevance at this point after failing to, hang on to some of the metropoles, or even dethrone up and comers like your Action SA, like your Al Jamaa. I forget what the other body is there in the Free State as well. This doesn't look good on them. It is a big egg on their face, and I expect them to do something about it. But whatever they do, they don't have any party tricks, and so they are definitely going to try to destabilize that. And the rest of the citizenry is going to see this and potentially vote again in favor of your newcomers, your more conservative parties, and pretty much anyone who doesn't rely on a radical message of some sort. So yeah, let's see how it plays.
Absolutely. And as I now pivot to giving everybody that final word, again, is to tackle this particular question. And I'll add a particular nuance to everybody. Marius, these 18 months that I speak of in the run-up to that next election does present itself unfettered access to the South African conservative. That's the South African conservative with a small c. Because I don't think we're hardline conservatives. I think we're just people who are rather rational, who are more to the center, if anything. That conservative now is itching to hear something different from someone different. And there is an openness to give me something that I can run with, as long as that thing helps me protect and preserve the family and build in this country. What's the role of the IRR in this regard?
Well, obviously, we'll be putting forward the ideas that we've been promoting for nearly 100 years now. Things like non-racialism, the free market, and so on. And I think we've seen there is an electoral market for parties that support things such as non-racialism, the free market, as I say. I think for me, one of the most interesting things from the November election last year was how well Action SA did in Johannesburg, and then to a less extent in Ekurhuleni and Tshwane, and in the 3 municipalities I think they ran in Natal. I mean, in Johannesburg, Herman Mashaba and Action SA got 16% of the vote in their very first election. While the EFF got only 10% of the vote. And the EFF actually went backwards in Joburg. And Herman Mashaba, the Action SA got 2% of the national vote, despite only running in 6 municipalities. So I think there's definitely, there's a lot you can say about Herman Mashaba, but if you take what he says, what the party stands for at face value, which is free markets, non-racialism, strong borders, and so on, there's definitely a market for it. And I think we've seen that some of these other parties, especially the EFF, I think they actually got quite a big fright. And we've seen how Julius Malema's rhetoric has changed very quickly, where, even a couple of months ago, he was saying, South Africa belongs to Africans. We should have open borders. A Malawian or Nigerian is as welcome in South Africa as anybody else. And we see this week he's been saying that Pedi should not have jobs in Durban, and Zulu should not have jobs in Polokwane, it actually boggles the mind that there's actually somebody saying this. I mean, if we accept that South Africa is one country, then if you're from Cape Town, you can go work in Messina if you want. If you're from wherever, Pongola, you're allowed to go work in Port Nolloth if you want. And also this kind of rhetoric, it's also creates tribalism, which South Africa to a degree hasn't really had a problem with, but where there have been obviously times in our history where it has been, but it hasn't been really a major problem. We could see that emerging with this kind of rhetoric from Julius Malema, and it's also going to give ammunition to the separatists in South Africa, whether they're from the Western Cape or from KwaZulu-Natal. If they're saying, well, if a Pedi is not welcome in KwaZulu-Natal, does that mean somebody from the Cape is not welcome in Joburg or whatever the case is? And we'll say, well, maybe it's time to undo the union. I'm an agnostic on Western Cape and KwaZulu-Natal independence. I prefer the union to remain. I like South Africa, but yeah, this kind of thing, it's going to give ammunition to people who want the country to break up. And I think this is all coming. Julius Malema is only saying these kinds of things because of how well Herman Mashaba did in Johannesburg in November last year, and he's definitely one to watch. I think he could be. He's got a very good chance of being a kingmaker in 2024 and being part of a governing coalition in 2 years from now.
But one gets the sense, Martin, as I come to you, maybe to conclude, and I want to add a different nuance, but something you can ride off of. One gets the sense that the EFF really is on its way out. And hear me out here. I'm not saying it's going to die completely in the next election, but one does get the sense that the ideas now, it's becoming a genuine battle of ideas amongst the electorate. It's no longer the battle of who gets the red T-shirt or the blue T-shirt or the food hamper or whatever the case may be. Yes, all of that still happens. But South Africans do seem to be maturing towards saying, tell me what you actually stand for and whether I believe you can achieve that particular idea. Ideas do seem to matter a little bit more now in this election. Let me be precise and specific because I saw it in the comment section. I think it was Julie saying, oh, why don't we talk about passports, ID documents, the control of our livelihoods? Well, actually, the last election was a referendum against all of that to a large extent, in the sense that people heard those ideas come out from the political elites and said, actually, no, we don't want, for example, vaccine passports, vaccine mandates, or the ever-controlling small elite, the cabal of organizations such as the National Coronavirus Command Council. What we want is a democracy where we can get to choose things, and if it's as local as possible, so be it.
Yeah, look, talking about the union, the man largely responsible for that, Jan Smuts, once said that in South Africa, the worst doesn't ever happen and the best doesn't ever happen. We always have this type of middle way where, unlike the rest of Africa, our society doesn't totally collapse, but we also don't prosper to our full potential. That's probably gonna be our lot when it comes to the EFF again, because if you vote them in, that is the end of the country. But now with this turn of events, I think it's something to be very positive about. For me specifically, the EFF was the party keeping me up at night, and after this last election, I feel a lot better. Now, I'm not going to underestimate them. There have been examples where by far small minority parties have taken over entire countries in the past, leading to disastrous results. So the EFF should not be underestimated. They're very clever political operators. So let's keep our eyes on them. But our South Africa's political dynamic has always been interesting, and it seems like people are starting to take notice. I am, like I said at the beginning of the show in my first comment, I am surprised that there's this very sudden turn against lockdown, for instance. I wouldn't have expected this, but most South Africans now seem to be saying, no, listen, we're done with this. Taking notice of the government's very obvious agenda of a power grab here. So I'm regaining a little bit of my optimism, and I think you might be broadly right, but always keep, as I think Benjamin Franklin said, the price of freedom is eternal vigilance, and that means that even when it's going well, you need to keep your eyes open to these people, and in South Africa specifically, that is, I would say, still the EFF. I would say the EFF is still the biggest emerging political threat in this country. So let's keep our eyes on them. But let's be positive for 2024 and after.
And Adams, maybe with you now having the final word, the next 18 months, therefore, does become the battle of, on the one hand, appealing to that South African who has a firm appreciation for liberty now, a firm appreciation for freedom. Again, they won't speak about it in academic sense. You know, they won't say, "Oh, John Stuart Mill says this," or "Milton Friedman says that," or "Hayek says this." No, that's not where they come from it. Their sense of a keen appreciation of freedom is: can I walk on this street, my street, at 12 p.m. in order to go to my friend's house where we're going to have a drink, thank you very much, in his yard, in his sanctity, and I don't face the risk of a soldier invading my private property and killing someone, as was the case at the beginning of this lockdown. It's amazing how we've forgotten the likes of Obo Collins Khoza, who were murdered by the state, a state pursuing these asinine ideas that were tyrannical in nature, anti-freedom in their posture. That South African now has a keen appreciation for the cost of freedom, and what freedom actually is. Number one. Number two, a keener, an even keener understanding. Once they have that elementary feel for what freedom is, and it opens the door for people like you and me to engage them on freedom, an even keener appreciation of how we preserve it, of not looking to politicians as the source of protecting us and preserving these freedoms, but actually the community and the family being the strongest a point on which we rally and defend our freedoms. AfriForum is a fantastic organization insofar as advocating for that, is it not?
Well, Sikhle, that's definitely AfriForum's strategy going forward. To those that are unaware, I'm also a campaigns officer at AfriForum, and this year we're going to be focusing a lot more on what we were focusing on before this pandemic hit. We're still going to be focusing on the fights for liberty in this country, but we need to get, as Martin said, we need to get back to the stuff that really matters, the stuff that's the pre-COVID issues. And another thing I think that's going to be important this year is there are going to be people, as lockdowns become more delegitimized, as a lot of these draconian measures start becoming less legitimate and less reasonable by the day. There are going to be people that cling on to them, people that have built their entire identities around being policemen for the bio COVID lockdown state. These people are going to not want it to end. They are going to want to keep being the class captain of their neighborhood, to find those people that are breaking the rules. They're going to want to write their name on the blackboard. Those people, you're going to want to, firstly, they need to be challenged and criticized in conversation. If you encounter them at a braai, you encounter them in some type of context, you're going to want to criticize them and mock them, even if they still cling on to irrational policies and policies that take away people's freedom and policies that oppress people and make their lives worse. Don't let them get away with it and make it just an issue of, oh, let's agree to disagree. No, this is something serious. This year we need to, like I said, rehabilitate normality. Don't stand for people that are advocating evil policies and policies that are hurting and destroying people's lives. Another group of people that should not be excused this year are people making apologies for the ANC. People saying that, they just give the ANC more time, they will renew, don't worry, any day now heads will roll for corruption. Those types of people also deserve mockery and also deserve criticism. Don't let them get away with it. Tell them that they need to put their money where their mouth is in regards to, or put their arguments where their mouth is. Justify why are you standing up for this immoral party that stole funds intended for the sick during a pandemic? Why are you still defending them? Why are you still making excuses for them? That's another group that are going to have to be really backed into a corner. Now, a last thing, maybe more of a positive note to end on for this year. I think people, as you rightly said, Sikhle, need to start focusing on their personal lives this year. I think I've said this on a previous episode as well. I don't think people should be focusing on trying to save the world or even trying to save their country. First, make sure that your family is functional. First, make sure that your neighborhood is clean. Make sure that your neighborhood is safe. Make sure that the things that you can change within your immediate vicinity are done. Don't try to clean up crime in the entire country. Make sure your street's safe. Join a neighborhood watch. For example, if you go to AfriForum's website and go check where we have neighborhood watches, we have over 150 neighborhood watches across the country. If there's not an AfriForum neighborhood watch in your neighborhood, there will be some other type of neighborhood watch that you can join. That's a productive thing you can do. Also, if there's rubbish in your street, clean it up. Make some effort to make your street clean. Don't try to clean up South Africa and pick up all the rubbish all across the country. Make sure your backyard doesn't have rubbish lying there. And then lastly, I think this year, make sure that the people around you, if they are in need, if your neighbor is in trouble or your neighbor needs something, make sure you're there for them. Make sure you're a pillar within the community. Make sure you're someone that can be counted on when things get tough. We saw that during the unrests last year in this country, where things were tough. Things were getting really dangerous for a lot of people, but communities stood together and neighbors helped neighbors and people stepped up to the plate. Very brave people. And you need to be that type of person. Don't shirk off responsibility. Don't stand back and say someone else stronger, smarter, more influential than me will do something. No, you be that person. You be that reliable neighbor. You be that good father. You be that pillar within the community. Then you'll see a lot of change sprout from that, just that little step and just a little bit of integrity in that regard.
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. And that's exactly why I wanted Adams to end off this particular segment. Let me thank my entire panel. It does feel like it's a Sunday evening on Liberty and Friends. But I did want to start the show exactly with the sort of people who you will see as a revolving panel, if you will, of faces, thinkers. That's, of course, Ukoketo Resane from the Man Patria podcast. Make sure you find them, please, on all their social media outlets. Adams Van Sale, host of Conscious Caracal. Please catch him, of course, on YouTube. Subscribe to his channel out in that part of the world. He's also part, as you heard, of the chaps at Afri Forum, doing fantastic work. And I must actually quickly just once again shout out to AfriForum, man, because again, there are people now who are looking at AfriForum and saying, you know what, instead of us hating this organization, accusing it of all sorts of things that it doesn't stand for, how about we learn and emulate that organization? There's a tweet I saw after the Zondo Commission state capture report was handed over to the president, a very prominent tweet that went viral, basically saying, is anybody keen to support me in setting up a private prosecutions arm to literally take on those implicated in this report? And I remember thinking, in fact, I tweeted, well, chat to the folks at AfriForum, because they've been doing that. As that Coca-Cola advert was, they've been having it. But shout out to the lads at AfriForum. Pardon me, Martin van Staden, of course, who is from Sakelecha. They're also chaps who I'll be connecting with this year to do some fantastic work. And of course, the Free Market Foundation, there he is, Martin van Staden. And of course, last but not least, Umarius Root from the Daily Friend publication. And of course, the Institute of Race Relations. Thank you to all of my guests. And thank you, of course, for watching this broadcast. As I can see, it is choppy and it has been a rather atrocious one. My apologies for that. We'll fix all of those glitches as the year goes ahead. Please remember, I will make some announcements around changes to the show, the format. You'll see much more BDL content coming your way as I'm more I'll be more studio based. I'm building a little studio in Johannesburg and a bit more studio based this year, and less traveling, but definitely more engagement with you. You'll see me on your streets around the country asking you questions, pushing these ideas, these faith, flag, family, and freedom values, and of course, liberty ideas into spaces and communities across the country. That's my mission. That's my contribution to this beloved country. So with that being said, thank you very much for watching this episode. Make sure you hit that like button on your way out. And hey, if you want to support the show, and I really do appreciate those who do, all of those details are in the descriptor of this video. With that being said, as I always end the show, a reminder to you, never trust a commie.